So this is the programming demo. We're going to talk a little bit about what an actual program looks like. Now, as we've been discussing in lecture, each program is going to be different depending on the project. So if you have a residential project and you're doing a program for that, it might look very different than that of a commercial project. So the size of your program is going to change based off the type of project that you're doing. For this particular demo, I'm going to show you an example and kind of step you through a program of a project that I did for a community center. So the program first is going to address the main things that we've been talking about: the introduction, the project information, programming considerations, the required spaces, and then the resources that are used in order to complete the program when you're doing your research. So in the introduction phase, it's going to address really just the project itself, your goals and objectives, and your precedent research. So for this particular project, we had a summary of what the community center was going to be with inside the community, who we were reaching, and the demographic. And then we also talked about goals and objectives. What do we want to set as far as goals for this particular project? Larger spaces, improved location, increased interaction with spaces, so creating more tactile surfaces. So this would be an example of having a particular project goal and setting how you're going to use that information when you start schematic or conceptual design. And then we researched and did a precedent with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. How are they building their buildings? How are they using their spaces? What can we learn from this particular project? And this is really what you learn from researching a precedent. So you really want to research the precedent and find out how things have been done previously and how you can then use that information for your future projects. Then we actually get into the project information, and this is where you compile all the research that you've done on the client, the users of the space, and all of your adjacencies and programming information. So for each individual space, you will do what we call spatial criteria. And so spatial criteria is then creating a summary of how the space is being used. So this is a spatial criteria for the entry or lobby. So it's saying that the entry or lobby is going to be the main circulation space. And then we have an adjacency diagram of the lobby and what spaces need to be directly adjacent to that. So here in this red circle is the entry, which we approximated at about 300 square feet. And then these are all the spaces that need to be in close proximity, and then the main circulation of the space. So usually for circulation, you want to take out about 5 to 10% of the main building, however much the square footage is, and that's what you usually use for your circulation space. And then each space has a spatial criteria, and you'll find an example of this for you to see and use for your group project. The spatial criteria is going to cover how much square foot is going to cover that particular space. Who are the people using the space? So who are the occupants? Is it just clients? Is it staff members, administrators? In this particular example, it was children, community members, general staff, and volunteers. What are the activities and the time that the space is being used for? So this could be different based off whatever project you have. You know, if it's a residence, this could be what activities are used in the living room or done in the living room, and what time of day do people mostly use the living room. So these are things that you have to think about in order to really make some educated decisions once you start moving forward in your design project. Occupant requirements deal with what needs to happen in the space in order for the people to occupy it in a healthy and safe way. So occupant requirements for the lobby would be maybe a security desk for safety, recessed floor for the rain and the snow coming in and out, a double door to make sure that the air is staying out of the building, ADA accessibility, emergency lighting. These are all things that have to be thought about for each particular space. Location requirements. So this is also what we think about when we start doing adjacency diagrams. What needs to have direct access to this particular space? How should it work directly with the spaces that are adjacent to it? And what's necessary in order for it to actually function in the space properly? So these are areas that we all think about and document in the spatial criteria sheets. So for your group project, you'll be putting together spatial criteria sheets for each space that your group agrees on that needs to be present in your particular design. And first, you're going to determine what all of those spaces are. And in your program, you do that in the beginning. And then you give a hierarchy as to what spaces become the most important and which one gets the most square footage. So if we are designing a space and we know that we are starting off with 10,000 square feet, in our program, we're going to make a list of all the spaces necessary for this particular design, and we're going to prioritize that list. So we're going to say, you know, if we're doing a house and we have to design a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, a family room, an office, what takes priority? Who's using what space the most? And what space is being used by a majority of the people in the house the most? So that's how we would divide up square footage. And based off of the square footage, we're going to give the most important spaces the most square footage and then work down. So you would create a priority list and determine square footage that way. So all of this information is compiled in your program. And so the bigger the project is, these are all an adjacency diagram of all of the spaces that we're going to use in this particular community center. So we're starting to see that each one of the classrooms needs to be adjacent to certain restrooms, that most of the main or public spaces need to be close together, whereas a lot of the private spaces go further out. And understanding daylighting, all of that's going to affect how you do different adjacency diagrams. And adjacency diagrams become important because now we're studying what spaces need to go relationally next to others and what relationships become very important before we even start fitting spaces into an actual floor plan. So it's really important to make sure we have this skill set as designers to be able to effectively program.